Hey guys, it's Kevin again, my review for this week of Big Brother 21, episodes 36 through 38, and guys, it's really getting down to it. This is, of course, the final full week. I can't believe that we are here either, but, there's really not a lot to talk about, to be honest with you, in terms of this week. A lot of what I'm discussing in this video is everything that went down prior to, like, Tommy's eviction and things like that, because that's what a lot of, like, Sunday's episode consisted of. But in terms of the week overall, I mean, it was pretty slow. There's not a lot to really talk about here. You know, there's only 4 people in the house. There's only so much that can go down. But I will admit, you know, compared to how other, like, Final Fours have played out, this was definitely one of the more exciting Final Fours I've seen. But there's also a lot that really did annoy me about this week that I will get into. But we're just getting into right now. And this was a really exciting week. At first it was, and then it just turned into regular Final Four. And look, I will say, out of Final Fours that we've had, this was definitely one of the more exciting ones, but there's only so much that can go down, and there were definitely some things that did annoy me a bit that I will get into, but obviously we're just gonna get into it right now. So, of course, we're first going to talk about Sunday night, which is where most of this video is mainly going to focus on, because that's really what I want to talk about the most. Less of what's going on in the Final Four, and more of everything that led up to Tommy getting evicted, because we really didn't know the full story. I mean, it seemed like Thursday night, they did a really good job with explaining, like, what really happened with the lie and things like that. But, as we know, right when Nicole wanted to call that house meeting, that's when the feeds cut, so we really did not have as clear of an idea as we did. And definitely seeing from this episode, yeah, no, we absolutely didn't. There was a lot more that went down for sure. And what went down is far different from what we originally thought, because of course, you know, before they made us think that the reason that Nicole and Cliff did not end up turning on Holly and decide to evict Tommy is because of Jackson's lie. You know, the lie that Tommy was going to work with Jackson and Cliff. He was going to play both sides. He was going to try to get out Cliff because he thought that Cliff could win the game, and then he was going to try to work with Jackson and Nicole. And I thought, okay, I mean, looking back, yes, there are a lot of holes in that, but I thought, yeah, Jackson's doing a really good job. This should get him a win. This is a really impressive move. But from seeing what really happened, I think it's much less about Jackson's lie. I do think it helped. It definitely did help. But what actually went down, I think, is less dependent on Jackson's lie and more just because of Cliff's resistance for some reason. He did not want to turn on Jackson and Holly, and I really don't understand why. Apparently, Cliff has thought for a while now that Jackson was going to take him to Final 2 over Holly, which I really don't understand at all. He doesn't seem to have any sort of willingness to even, you know, somewhat go along with Nicole's plan. I don't really think he ever did. I think while he is working with Nicole, I think he's always felt differently from her, and I think ultimately that's what kept this from being a thing. That's what kept this from happening. So, okay, I understand that. Now it makes more sense why that happened. Obviously, Nicole didn't have the votes. I've heard a lot of people say, well, why did Nicole need to work with Cliff? Well, remember, these are the only 2 people that can cast a vote. If Nicole doesn't have the votes, why is she going to make herself a target in that way? Why is she going to, you know, because even if she does, I mean, Jackson breaks the tie, Tommy's going to go. It's just not worth it at that point. So that's ultimately why it didn't end up happening. But that's not the part of this that really annoys me, because I am obviously annoyed that Cliff for some reason thought that Jackson was going to work with him, and that he would for some reason turn on Holly, even though there's no way, as Jackson would say, there's not a snowball's chance that that would actually happen. That's not the part that pissed me off. The part that pissed me off is that for a while, it seemed like this plan was actually working out. Like, they were at a point where it seemed like they could send Holly out the door. The way that Tommy was reacting, especially, I mean, there's no possible way that he could have been lying. Jackson, yeah, the way that he was talking, his, you know, the way that he was just verbalizing things, it sounded very false. It sounded very rehearsed. He kept repeating the same point over and over again. This is something that Nicole very much picks up upon, whereas Tommy, he very much, you can tell, is being confronted. He doesn't know what's going on. He's very frazzled. He is kind of having a hard time getting out the words. In fact, he actually isn't yelling at first. He is very insistent on the fact that he didn't say any of this stuff, and he really does crack under the pressure. So after that whole house meeting, you think, okay, why? Well, oh, it seems like, you know, Tommy is telling the truth. Why would they ever decide to turn on Holly? Well, it's really because of what ends up happening after. Cliff literally ends up, you know, we have this conversation with Jackson, Cliff, and Nicole. Because we have this conversation with Jackson, Cliff, and Nicole. He's talking to them, asking them, you know, if they were planning on turning on Holly. And Cliff literally tells him right then and there that they were planning on keeping Tommy. I was literally speechless when this happened. I could not believe that Cliff would do something like this. I mean, look, I get it. For some reason, he believes that Jackson and Holly are on his side. But come on, Cliff. I mean, you had the votes to do this. This could have actually worked out. You could have sent Tommy out the door. He would have turned on Jackson. He even admitted that he thought that Jackson was more of a threat than Cliff and Nicole. This could have gone out swimmingly. Tommy needed to win. If Tommy won HOH, or, you know, he said he would have possibly thrown it as well. I just don't know why Cliff had to do this, because this is when Jackson goes just into full-on rant mode. He's talking about how he doesn't know how they could have turned on him, and that Tommy wavered, and that they can't trust him, and things like that. Again, just repeating the same point over and over again. He starts, like, flailing his arms around and things like that, and I just don't understand why Cliff would do this. I don't understand why he thought this would be a good idea. Look, I get it that they've been in the house for a long time now. I get it that clearly the 90-something days is starting to get to him. You can tell he's not thinking rationally, but this was just such a dumb move altogether. I really do think that they could actually pull this off. This could have actually worked out. But because Cliff had to run his mouth, that's why this did not work out the way they wanted it to. And look, Jackson definitely was not helping with the way that he kept saying the same point over and over again. But I feel like if Cliff had any sense, which Nicole clearly did, he would have been able to detect that, like, yeah, Jackson is lying. I mean, he just sounded so rehearsed. It didn't sound real at all. Holly was saying absolutely nothing. Holly's the person that should be trying to do something, but she does absolutely nothing here. Ultimately, what ends up happening is that Cliff and Nicole do end up going to Holly because they want to work something out. They want to make sure that they don't have a target on themselves. They're realizing that there really is no way they're going to be able to get Holly out of this game. So they decide they're going to make this deal with her that if she decides to throw the HOH and possibly the veto as well, then she can, then they will keep her in the house and she doesn't have to worry about it. And so she agrees to it. Tommy's gone. That's really all there is left to talk about come Sunday night. Well, that is until we get to finally seeing how this HOH comp played out. And this HOH comp was probably one of the fastest I've ever seen, but it also didn't start out that way because, remember, Holly made this agreement with Cliff and Nicole that she was going to throw this comp. And we remember this, and Jackson remember this as well. So the way it's going, you're wondering, when is Holly going to fall? You know, Cliff falls first, and you thought that it was going to be Holly, but no, Cliff ends up falling first, and it's down to Holly and Nicole. She seems like she really wants to win this thing, and she's not being loyal. You know, she's not following through. Basically, she only falls because Jackson is so insistent on it. He's like, look, you have to fall. We had an agreement. You have to fall. And look, I've said before that I think Jackson is incredibly emotionally abusive towards Holly, but he does have a point. She made this deal with them. She needs to honor it. She can't just turn her back on it because she wants to win this comp, and all of a sudden she decides to be, just complain constantly. She made this deal. She agreed to it. Yes, they presented to her. She could have easily said no. If she really did not believe it, she could have said no. Honestly, she could have done that. I understand that it was her life in the game, but if she in good conscience did not want to agree to this deal, she could have easily said no. But no, she agreed to it. She needs to follow through. She does end up falling. Nicole basically becomes the default HOH at that point, and it's really great. I love seeing Nicole win. I love seeing her having an HOH room, all week and things like that. But again, it just really made me annoyed at Holly. I was very annoyed at Holly throughout this entire week. All week, she's just complaining about how, oh, this was my HOH, I need to win HOH, Cliff and Nicole are keeping me from doing this. It's like, no, they're not. They didn't force you into taking this deal. They presented it to you, said that, use it as a reason to keep you in. They were trying to, weigh out their pros and cons and things like that. And basically, if you took that deal, they would save you. And obviously, yeah, I think she knew that, but for some reason, she didn't think she needed to follow through with it. And I don't really understand why. It's really dumb overall, but the way things end here, Nicole does end up putting Jackson and Holly on the block, obviously, because they're the only people left. That's really the way we end things on Sunday night. We do get this really stupid scene, though, with Jackson and him crying over Tommy and how he didn't want to hurt him and things like that. And look, I'm sure Jackson feels a little bit bad for what he did. I really do, but I don't think that it was to the point where he was this emotional about it. I just didn't buy it for a second. It very much seemed like he was just trying to, get in the good graces of America, get on the path where, he can have that winner's edit, get us to root for him. I didn't buy it for a second. It just did not work here at all. And Jackson this whole week was really annoying me with him being like, I want that confetti. I need that confetti on me. I'm going to walk out with all that confetti. It's like, you haven't won yet. You're not even in the top 3 yet. For all you know, you could end up leaving this week. Like, just stop. Like, yes, I know you want to win, but you haven't won yet. He's already acting like he's won. He constantly brings up how Cliff and Nicole are taking his money and things like that, and just... this really shows the side of Jackson that I can't stand. Like I said, I do think Jackson is a good game player, but it's moments like this where I have a very hard time actually rooting for him. And again, you can really see why here. So other than that, there really isn't a lot to talk about here. I mean, Wednesday night's episode, there's 2 comps to play out. One is a luxury comp, the other is a POV, and that takes up the majority of the episode. We have the luxury comp, which Jackson ends up winning very easily. Nicole comes pretty close, but Jackson does end up winning this luxury comp. It was fine, I guess. I mean, it was different from what they normally do, which I liked. It was like, they changed things around the house, and they had to figure out, what was altered and things like that. It was cool to see Ovi again. I like that he came in with, like, the cookies and things like that, so they didn't forget that he was part of the season, because that does often happen. People that leave early on, they tend to forget that they were there. They act like they weren't a part of the show. So it was cool to see Ovi come back, other than just seeing him briefly in the finale. That was kind of cool to see. But other than that, there wasn't really a lot to that. The real thing to talk about is that for some reason, Cliff, again, feels that he needs to take Jackson to Final 2. But he also tells Jackson that he doesn't plan to take him to Final 2. So it's like, obviously, he's not going to honor this deal. I don't know why Cliff believes that Jackson would abandon Holly like that. I just don't get it. I really don't get what's going through Cliff's head here. It doesn't really make any sense. But we do get to the POV, which was really dragged out. It was one of those things where they had to, guess the house guests and things like that fit this category. And Jackson once again ends up coming, Jackson ends up winning this pretty much by a landslide, and obviously he's going to take himself off the block. Now Nicole knows that Cliff is going to go up, but they have, for some reason, they have this hope that maybe Jackson will get rid of Holly. Maybe he will cut Holly there. As far as Nicole goes, I think she was just saying this because she wanted to hope that Cliff could still be in the game. But Cliff seems convinced. Like, he thinks that Jackson is actually going to go after Holly here, which I really don't understand at all. But that's the way we end things on Wednesday night. Getting into Thursday, again, not really a lot to talk about here either. Really just a lot of Cliff campaigning to Jackson, and honestly, Cliff's campaign wasn't all that bad. He's trying to do what he can to make sure that he stays in the house. He's trying to make sure he can do what he can to save himself. And I think at a Final 4, you should try to do that. You should push as hard as you possibly can. And I do think Cliff did a good job with that. It's just Jackson is obviously not going to do anything. And I think... look, as much as I do think you should campaign, I think Cliff already should have known that, like, his game was pretty much done, and that there was no possible way that Jackson was gonna turn on Holly. I just don't understand why Cliff thought that would be a possibility. But it's especially these deals that Jackson and Holly made. It just makes you wonder why they even did them. They're not necessary. The only thing that matters this week is the veto. That's it. And yes, Jackson won the veto. He takes down, he takes down himself and puts up Cliff, and then he casts a sole vote. There just isn't really enough of a reason for this to be a thing. I don't know why Holly is so butthurt about it. I don't know why Jackson made these deals in the first place. And ultimately, I don't know why he's surprised that Cliff is upset about the fact that Jackson isn't going to take him and is upset about the fact that Jackson doesn't plan on saving him. I mean, Cliff should have known that, like, obviously Jackson wasn't going to turn on Holly. But if Jackson hadn't presented this to him in the first place, I think things would be a lot better for him. Because of this, I think Jackson has really poor jury management. He really did show it here. So yeah, just a lot of really dumb stuff going on Thursday. The real stuff to talk about is the jury. We actually get a lot of jury footage in this episode, and I like what I saw for the most part. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Nick and Kat. I'll say this, I don't really know where this came from. It kind of came out of nowhere. It seems like Kat's someone who's just very flirty. She will get with whoever's there. Nick was there. Obviously, Jack was with Sis. Nick was there. Kat and him got close, and now they're a thing. And whoop-de-doo, I guess. I mean, Nick's still a piece of shit. The way that he just didn't even have anything to say about Bella, you know, when Christie asked him about it or when the producer asked him about it, really just shows how kind of disgusting of a person he really is. And, I mean, I don't like Bella at all. I don't think that she is a very good person, and I don't think she's handled, you know, especially coming off of the season, I don't think she's handled herself very well at all. But you gotta feel bad for her. I mean, just the fact that he's completely just dropped her from his life and wants to pretend like they never happened is really shallow. And I definitely do feel bad for Bella in that respect, but that's not what I'm going to talk about, obviously. The real stuff to talk about is where everyone does lie going forward. So there was a lot of stuff that we heard here. A lot of it concerned Jackson, though. We hear Nick talking about how, like, he's proclaiming Jackson's, like, one of the best ever, which, I mean, I don't really think Nick saying that has much merit, really. I don't really consider Nick that great of a player, especially when his pitch, remember, was, I'm gonna be your condom, you know, comparing himself to a condom. So that tells you how, I think, how strictly and how just, you know, again, just how seriously we should take Nick overall. He's just not someone, and I think Kat can reel him in that way. But it seems like a lot of people are for Jackson, but I also heard a lot about Holly, and a lot of people do think that Holly should end up winning. I mean, Jack's whole thing did seem pretty fake. It seemed like they only said that because they needed something about Holly. It's very much Jackson and Nicole, though. I like hearing Sis say that, like, if Nicole wins more comps, she's going to vote for her. That's really great to see. And I also like seeing Jessica turn around on Nicole, because I gotta admit, I was very worried. You know, there was that video that came out where Jessica said that, like, Nicole was a mole. So I'm glad that she's turned around, and I think going into this, it's pretty obvious, like, if one of them are in the final, you know, Nicole or Jackson, if they're in the final two, one of them is gonna win. It's pretty obvious. I think Holly doesn't really have that great of a chance of winning, although she might now, based on one thing. But overall, it was cool to see the jury. I don't know why Nick has this animosity towards Christie, though. I really don't get it at all. I mean, sure, you know, yes, she did sully his gameplay in that way, but she's also trying to save herself, Nick. You should expect her to do that. I don't understand why he had to be that way towards her. I don't understand why he had to have this bitterness towards her. It was just really ridiculous. You know, the way that was done was really dumb. Seeing Tommy reveal to everyone that him and Christie knew each other, I mean, the way the jury reacted was pretty great. I like that they, you know, talked about how, like, they were able to hold their own and things like that. Again, it's disappointing that we're not going to get that segment in the finale, but at least the jury knows. At least the jury knows now, you know, we can be done with this and move on pretty much. I also like that Sis asked if, like, this was something that was deliberate. I thought that was honestly pretty funny, because, like, that's something that we were wondering. And no, even Christie and Tommy talked about, like, no, this was just purely coincidental on Robin Cass's part, and I really hope she gets her shit together next year, because this, again, this was really bad. The fact that they actually knew each other, and the fact that Kat and Holly also had a previous interaction is really bad. I think they need to do a better job. Again, Robin Cass usually does a really great job casting-wise, but this year, I don't know what happened. I really don't, and that's something that just should have never been. But again, I like that they laughed at themselves, and we can be done with this. But overall, it was cool to see the jury. It was cool where all of them lied and things like that. We do ultimately, though, end the night with Cliff leaving. But I have to say, the way that Jackson handled himself here, again, I thought was particularly really bad. And it actually does tie into something that Christie mentioned, where she said how Jackson overall had a really bad social game. And I very much will agree with that. I think Jackson, he's won comps when he needs to. He does a good job with that. But social game-wise, he's really not that great. And Cliff leaving especially, and Jackson telling him that he needs to, you know, vote strictly on game, and basically telling him not to be bitter. That alone just shows how badly Jackson has conducted himself in terms of, you know, jury management. He's done a terrible job with that, and I don't understand why he needed to tell Cliff this as he was leaving. But that's nothing compared to his GBM, though. His goodbye message to Cliff is all kinds of terrible. He basically just gaslights him the whole time, telling him that, like, this is your fault, you know, you trying to coerce a jury against me and things like that. How dare you do such a thing? It's like, bro, he's trying to do what he can to save himself in the house. Obviously, at this point, there's only 4 people left. That is a viable strategy, saying that, like, I will not vote for you if you're on the jury if you make this move. That is a good strategy. That's actually a really good way of keeping yourself in the game in that way. You know, you're showing that you are going to be bitter. You know, you hint to the fact that, you know, you can get me out, but I might be bitter. You're just kind of like encouraging him to be bitter in that way. You telling him not to be bitter is just kind of encouraging him to do that. So I think this could potentially ruin Jackson's chances of winning. I don't know if it fully will, but I could very much see it happening. I could very much see a scenario where Jackson's sitting next to Holly at the final 2, and Holly ends up winning because the jury is bitter against Jackson. I can totally see that happening. Moving forward, we now have our final 3, though, of Jackson, Nicole, and Holly. And like I said, going into this, it's pretty clear Jackson or Nicole is going to win. I am very much rooting for Nicole here, absolutely. In terms of Jackson, though, like I said, I think he's played a good game competition-wise. He's done a really good job with that. The lie that he came up with was pretty brilliant. I'm definitely not going to deny that for sure. But social game-wise, it's just really hard to, it's really hard to justify that. It's really hard for me to think, like, yes, I don't like Jackson personally. I've mentioned this many times before. There's many people in this season I don't like personally at all, and I've tried to keep that out of it, but considering the way that Jackson handled himself, it's kind of hard to do that. It's kind of hard to judge Jackson based on just game alone when he was, I think, really unnecessarily cruel towards Cliff this week, and really acting all high and mighty when he truthfully did not need to do that. He could have done things in a much better way. And I mean, he was doing a good job. Like, his first speech, like, when he was getting rid of Cliff, actually wasn't too bad. I didn't think he did that bad of a job with that overall. I thought he did a good job with talking about, like, you know, how he needs to keep Holly in the game and things like that, and that this is strictly a game move. But then you can't say that and then tell Cliff to judge strictly on game. I don't understand where Jackson is coming from here. This was a really dumb move overall. But either way, guys, that's really all there is to talk about. Moving forward, like I said, Jackson or Nicole are probably going to take the win. Holly, I think the only way that Holly's going to win is if the jury's bitter. I think if the jury's bitter, and Jackson and Holly are at that final 2, I think Holly will take it pretty much unanimously. I think that could very much end up being a scenario, but I guess we'll have to see the way things do end up playing out overall. I can't believe that we're already at the finale, though. Julie did mention that Sunday's episode is going to be a little bit different. They're not going to be doing just like the recap of the recap, which is good because I hate those kind of episodes. I hate the recap episode that they do. You know, I really can't stand it at all. I always think it's like very forced and things like that. Apparently she's going to interview the final 3 of last season. There's been, and I mean, this isn't surprising. A lot of this season has been reintroducing, characters from season 20 because they clearly know the season sucks and they want us to have a reason to watch it, so they bring back, fan favorite characters, and I think that's a good way to do that. But what do they have planned? I'm not really sure. If that's going to be something I talk about, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see the way that episode plays out. But either way, guys, in my review this week of Big Brother, the most guys thought of this week overall, left your thoughts in it. I can't believe we're already at the finale, but it's really getting down to it, guys. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.